Never been loved by a woman like I've loved him, because he lived in a loveless marriage for so long. And he covered for his wife for years, because he always believed that somehow God would work a miracle.
8 weeks before she died, Joni Lamb signed a legal document that almost nobody noticed. It was buried in routine public property records, no press release, no announcement, no carefully worded statement from Daystar's communications team. Just a quitclaim deed, filed through the ordinary machinery of Florida property law, with one very specific and very deliberate effect. Her husband's name was removed from a $2.9 million beach condominium on the Florida coast, a property the two of them had purchased together, and with a single legal filing, full and sole ownership of that asset was transferred into Joni Lamb's personal revocable trust alone. Doug Weiss was off the deed. Joni Lamb was the only owner, and she had, at that moment, approximately 8 weeks left to live. This video is about that document, and about everything the documented record around it reveals about the final chapter of one of the most consequential lives in American Christian broadcasting. We are going to go through all of it, carefully, honestly, and with the seriousness this story deserves. Not to sensationalize, not to perform outrage, but because a woman of Joni Lamb's experience, a woman who had navigated Marcus Lamb's public extramarital affair, sustained a multi-million-dollar media network through decades of controversy, and managed a real estate portfolio worth nearly $12 million, does not sign legal documents without intention. She knew what she was doing, and the question of why she did it is one that, even now, does not have a clean or simple answer. Before we go further, a note on sourcing. Everything in this video is drawn from publicly documented records and verified investigative reporting, including the Roy's Report, the Trinity Foundation, the Christian Post, the Fort Worth Report, Colorado State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor records, and public property filings. Where claims are disputed or unresolved, we will say so directly. Our goal is precision. The facts in this story are compelling enough that they do not require embellishment. Let us start with the document itself. A quitclaim deed is one of the most straightforward instruments in real property law. Unlike a warranty deed, which comes with legal guarantees about the quality of the title being transferred, a quitclaim deed simply conveys whatever ownership interest the signing party currently holds. No guarantees, no warranties. The legal translation is essentially, I transfer my interest in this property to this entity or person. It is commonly used in estate planning, in divorce proceedings, and in family property transfers precisely because it is clean, direct, and efficient. What Joni Lamb did, according to public property records documented by the Roy's Report and the Trinity Foundation, was transfer the joint ownership interest she and Doug Weiss held in a $2.9 million waterfront condominium in Miramar Beach, Florida, purchased in September 2023. Shortly after their June 2023 marriage, into her own personal revocable trust. The effect was immediate and legally complete. Doug Weiss no longer held any ownership stake in that property. The deed was signed and filed in March 2026. Joni Lamb died on May 7, 2026, 65 years old, at the Oasis of Hope Cancer Center in Tijuana, Mexico, where she had gone in her final weeks for treatment of metastatic bone cancer. She was, at the time of the deed's filing, privately aware that she was terminal. Daystar's public communications had characterized her condition differently. Doug Weiss himself told Daystar viewers in April 2026 that Joni was dealing with 2 hairline fractures in her spine. The full picture, including the metastatic bone cancer diagnosis and the Mexico treatment facility, was not confirmed publicly until after her death, through reporting by the Roy's Report and other outlets. So here's the specific situation we are examining. A woman in the final weeks of a terminal illness, privately aware she is dying, with a complex estate and contested family relationships, quietly removes her husband of less than 3 years from the title of a multi-million-dollar jointly owned property. That is not routine estate administration. That is a decision made with intention, at a moment when every decision carries weight. The Florida condominium was just one piece of a much larger financial picture. According to reporting by the Trinity Foundation, which has spent years documenting real estate holdings of prominent ministry leaders, at the time of her death, Joni had owned 7 residential properties spanning 4 states, with a combined estimated value of approximately $11.7 million. In her final year of life, as documented in the Trinity Foundation's report titled Preparing for Death, Downsizing During Joni Lamb's Final Year, she sold 3 of those properties and placed 4 into trusts. These were not passive decisions. This was a deliberate and systematic effort to organize her financial affairs in a specific way before she died. She sold her 2-story Colleyville, Texas residence in October 2025, a home Redfin valued at more than $3.3 million, and which the Tarrant County Appraisal District had valued at $5.7 million for tax purposes. She sold her Taylor's, South Carolina residence. She sold a lake house in Granbury, Texas. She placed her remaining properties, including the Florida condominium, into trusts, and within that broader restructuring, she signed a quitclaim deed that specifically and individually removed Doug Weiss's name from the most valuable jointly held property in her portfolio. The Trinity Foundation's reporting also noted that Daystar's ministry, Word of God Fellowship, sold its Gulfstream GV jet during this same period, the same jet that had been at the center of a documented controversy about personal use of ministry aviation resources. Understanding that jet controversy and the broader financial relationship between Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss is essential context for understanding why the quitclaim deed carries the weight it carries. The ministry jet story is specific, documented, and quantified. According to Trinity Foundation's investigation, Daystar's Gulfstream GV made at least 24 round-trip flights between Fort Worth, Texas, Daystar's home base, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, between October 2022 and May 2024. Doug Weiss is based in Colorado Springs. Those flights began in October 2022, which coincides with the period when Joni and Doug reportedly entered their courtship. The jet also made 13 round-trip flights from Fort Worth to Destin, Florida, during the same time frame, near the area where the beach condominium would later be purchased in September 2023. The Trinity Foundation estimated the total operating cost of those flights at approximately $769,220. Had the same trips been made commercially, the comparable cost would have been roughly $18,800, meaning the premium for using the ministry jet represented an estimated $750,000 more than commercial alternatives would have cost. Daystar operates under church status, which exempts it from IRS Form 990 financial disclosure requirements that apply to other nonprofits. This means that the public cannot see the full picture of how the jet was used, who authorized those uses, and how the costs were categorized. Trinity Foundation, through independent flight tracking and cost analysis, reconstructed the documented picture that Daystar's own records would not voluntarily reveal. The honeymoon expense question is equally specific and equally documented. Joni Lamb publicly denied, in a 36-minute video response posted to social media, that Daystar had paid for her honeymoon. Absolutely not. Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon, she stated. We paid for our honeymoon. However, the Roy's report obtained 2 Daystar expense reports showing that Joni charged approximately $100,000 to her Daystar corporate credit card for a luxury resort in Los Cabos, Mexico, Las Ventanas al Paraíso, where she and Doug honeymooned in July 2023. The first charge from October 2022 was $36,780.32. The second charge from May 2023 was $60,000 and $41.68. An itemized resort bill obtained by the Roy's report put the total honeymoon expenditure, including food, drinks, and tips, at $103,818. Notes on the expense reports read, Ms. Joni Lamb and Mr. Doug Weiss use U.S. bank rebate/points, suggesting the intent was to use accumulated credit card points to cover what were personal charges. But according to Jonathan Lamb, who held oversight of Daystar's finances at the time, he had confirmed with Daystar's CFO, Arnold Torres, and head of accounting Eddie Lisdianto, that the card had not accumulated enough points to cover the charges, meaning actual Daystar funds were used to pay the credit card bill. When Jonathan raised formal objections to these charges at an August 2023 board meeting, a board that at that time consisted of only 3 members, Jonathan, Joni, and attorney Tom Calender, board member Tom Calender decided to formally gift the approximately $100,000 to Joni from Daystar, effectively authorizing the expenditure retroactively. The Roy's report requested documentation from Daystar showing any subsequent reimbursement for the charges. Daystar issued a statement asserting that all personal charges on corporate cards were fully accounted for and reimbursed, but provided no documentation whatsoever when that documentation was specifically requested. No reimbursement documentation was ever produced. The compensation record adds a third layer of documented financial context. According to reporting by the Roy's report, Joni Lamb's personal compensation at Daystar increased by approximately 140% following Marcus Lamb's death, reaching over $1 million annually. Her clergy housing allowance, a tax-exempt category that receives significant scrutiny in investigative reporting, totaled $1,671,324 across a 9-year period from 2002 to 2011, according to Trinity Foundation analysis of financial documents that were unsealed in a legal proceeding involving a former Daystar employee. This is the financial world into which Doug Weiss stepped when he married Joni Lamb. a ministry with global reach, a personal estate estimated at $40 million, a real estate portfolio worth $11.7 million, a Gulfstream jet, $1 million annual compensation package, and institutional governance structured to minimize external financial scrutiny. All of it became accessible to him through a marriage that was controversial from the moment it was announced. To understand the full significance of the quitclaim deed, you need to understand Doug Weiss, not the version presented during his years as a Daystar fixture, but the version documented in public records, state licensing authority findings, and investigative reporting. Doug Weiss is a licensed psychologist based in Colorado Springs. He founded Heart to Heart Counseling Center, which offers intensive multi-day programs, described on his website as costing as much as $15,000, aimed at couples dealing with sexual addiction, infidelity, and a concept he developed called intimacy anorexia, which he describes as emotional and sexual withdrawal within a marriage. He has authored more than 40 books on marriage and healing, and his public profile was substantially built through years of regular appearances on Daystar television, alongside Marcus and Joni Lamb. What the Daystar presentations did not include, and what is a matter of documented public record, are 2 formal letters of admonition from the Colorado State Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Psychologists. The Roy's Report's investigative reporting confirmed both findings. The first, issued in 2002, found that Weiss had misrepresented himself as a licensed marriage and family therapist, a credential he did not hold and was not authorized to claim. The second, issued in 2010, addressed his conduct during one of his multi-day counseling intensives, with the board finding that his interventions had been clinically inappropriate, that rather than facilitating healing, his approach had reportedly pushed couples toward premature discussions of divorce and asset distribution in ways the board found violated professional standards. These are not allegations from disgruntled clients. These are formal findings from Colorado's State Professional Licensing Authority, entered into the official record. In addition to those state board findings, the Roy's Report published documented testimony from multiple former clients of Heart to Heart Counseling Center, describing their experiences of the multi-day intensives as traumatizing rather than healing. Former clients described polygraph practices and counseling dynamics they experienced as coercive. Weiss has not responded publicly to those accounts in substantive detail. They stand as part of the documented record of his professional practice. The timeline of events surrounding his marriage to Joni Lamb is also part of the verified record. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021. Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of over 30 years, Lisa Weiss, on January 27th, 2022, less than 2 months after Marcus's death. That divorce was finalized on May 31st, 2022. However, Weiss did not publicly disclose his divorce until February 8th, 2023, nearly a full year after the filing. During that entire period, he continued to operate his counseling business and present publicly as an authority on marriage, fidelity, and restoration, while privately transitioning out of his own marriage of 3 decades. By August 2022, according to documented accounts, Weiss and Joni were in a courtship that was described publicly as carefully chaperoned. By March 2023, he had proposed. Their marriage was formalized on June 10th, 2023, less than 18 months after Marcus's death. The ministry jet flights to Colorado Springs began that same October 2022, tracking the arc of their courtship with documented precision. The tension between Weiss's public positioning as a marriage restoration expert, someone who counsels broken couples toward healing and fidelity, and the documented timeline of his own private life is one that multiple people who have followed this story have found difficult to reconcile. The Roy's Report documented this timeline in careful detail. It stands as verified. The financial record cannot be fully understood without understanding the family conflict that defined the final chapter of Joni Lamb's life, because the two are inseparable. Jonathan Lamb, Joni's son, opposed the marriage to Doug Weiss on both biblical and practical grounds, and his opposition was not passive. He formally objected to specific ministry expenditures, the jet flights, the honeymoon charges, the broader governance questions, and those objections were documented in recordings and in the formal record of Daystar board proceedings reported by the Roy's Report. His objections made him an institutional problem for the arrangement that had been constructed around Joni's marriage and the resulting leadership structure at Daystar. The August 2023 board meeting where Jonathan raised the honeymoon objections was not the end of the conflict. It was closer to the beginning of its final escalation. In November 2023, Jonathan was called to a board meeting at which he was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Audio recordings of that meeting reported by the Roy's Report documented the board, including Tom Calender and Daystar's legal counsel, pressing Jonathan to sign. Jonathan refused. On November 16, 2023, he was officially fired from Daystar, the network his parents had built and where he had worked his entire professional life. His 40% salary had already been cut as part of a demotion. His wife Susie's parents were also fired from Daystar. A GPS tracker was discovered on his vehicle in November 2023, with expense reports subsequently linking the tracking to Shannon Kelly, Daystar's head of security. A private investigator, Jameson Bradley Parker, was documented conducting surveillance on Jonathan and Susie in September 2024. What followed was a period in which Joni Lamb was surrounded, in her day-to-day life and in her final months, primarily by people with an institutional and personal stake in the continuation of the leadership arrangement that had been constructed around her marriage to Weiss. According to multiple documented accounts, Jonathan and Susie Lamb were not called to Joni's bedside in her final days. They were not informed of her death until after it had occurred. They were excluded from meaningful participation in her memorial service, a service attended by figures including former President Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Paula White Cain, and Joel Osteen, who delivered tributes. Jonathan and Susie were present at the service, but were seated apart from the family section and were not acknowledged during the eulogies delivered by his siblings. This was the environment inside which Joni Lamb made her final legal decisions, including the quitclaim deed. Joni Lamb did not leave a public explanation for the quitclaim deed. Doug Weiss has not commented on it in any documented public statement. The transfer is a matter of public record. The conversations that led to it are not. Honesty requires acknowledging the limits of what can be known from the outside of someone else's private decision. But the documented context allows for careful assessment of the most plausible explanations, while being transparent about what remains uncertain. The most legally straightforward explanation is estate planning. Placing assets into a revocable trust is standard practice for anyone with significant holdings who wants to ensure smooth, probate-free transfer of those assets after death. Joni was terminally ill, organizing her finances and consolidating her portfolio. The Florida condominium moving into her personal trust could be as simple as ensuring that asset passed according to her documented wishes without court involvement. This explanation is plausible, but it sits against a specific and important fact. The property had been jointly owned with Doug Weiss, and the deed specifically removed his name. If the goal were simply probate avoidance, the mechanism would typically involve placing both names into a joint trust, not removing one name from an existing co-ownership. The specific operative effect of this deed was the elimination of Doug Weiss's individual ownership claim on that property. That specificity invites closer examination. A second possible explanation involves the desire to protect her children's inheritance. Without the quitclaim deed, a jointly owned property would, upon Joni's death, have passed directly to Doug Weiss as the surviving joint owner, potentially bypassing her children entirely. By transferring the property into her personal trust, Joni retained the ability to direct exactly where that asset went. Whether her intended beneficiaries were her children, a combination of heirs, or charitable causes is something only her trust documents, not yet publicly accessible, would reveal. A third possibility is suggested by the broader pattern of events, rather than by any single document, that Joni's private assessment of her relationship with Doug Weiss in those final weeks reflected something she was not willing to put into public words. Whether that involved doubts about his intentions, concerns raised by family members, counsel from a trusted advisor, or simply a recognition that a man whose relationship with her children was fractured should not inherit a jointly held multi-million-dollar asset outside of her explicit direction. Any of these motivations could explain the deed without requiring bad faith from anyone. What makes the question particularly significant is what we know about Joni Lamb's legal and financial sophistication. This was not a woman who made careless legal decisions. She had navigated the most turbulent chapters of a major ministry for decades. She had managed a $12 million real estate portfolio. She had spent her final year in a systematic, deliberate restructuring of her entire financial picture. She had been personally advised throughout by legal counsel experienced in estate planning. She understood exactly what a quitclaim deed does. The decision was not impulsive, it was intentional. The question of which specific intention it reflected may, in the absence of Joni's own account, never be fully answerable. The $2.9 million Florida condominium and the quitclaim deed that removed Doug Weiss from its title are, in one sense, a single data point in a much larger story. But they are a data point that carries unusual weight precisely because of where it sits in the timeline, in the final 8 weeks of a woman's life, after years of institutional conflict, documented financial controversy, and profound family fracture. The documented financial record of Joni Lamb's final years at Daystar raises legitimate questions that have not been answered by the organization. The ministry jet usage documented by Trinity Foundation at nearly $770,000 for flights to Doug Weiss's home city and the Florida property where their beach condominium was located. The honeymoon expense reports documented by the Roy's report, for which no reimbursement documentation was ever produced, despite Daystar's assertion that all personal charges were fully reimbursed. The 140% compensation increase following Marcus's death, pushing Joni's annual pay past $1 million. The 7 properties worth nearly $12 million held by a person whose ministry compensation came entirely from donor support. The $40 million estate now at the center of an unresolved succession story. These are not accusations. They are documented facts drawn from public records and verified independent investigative reporting. What they collectively represent is a picture of significant financial complexity at an institution that claims church status and therefore operates without the public financial transparency required of other large nonprofits. Daystar is not required to file a Form 990. Its financial affairs are not publicly visible in the way a secular nonprofits would be. Daystar was built by Marcus and Joni Lamb to reach the world with the message of the gospel. Millions of viewers support it financially. They give because they believe in what it claims to represent. And those viewers, those donors, those partners, those ordinary households that send in monthly contributions have a legitimate and meaningful interest in how the financial resources of that institution are managed, who benefits from them, and whether the boundaries between personal wealth and ministry stewardship are being honored. These are not radical questions. They are the basic accountability questions that any well-governed institution should be able to answer with transparency. The fact that Joni Lamb, in the final weeks of her life, was quietly restructuring a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio and specifically removing her husband's name from a jointly held property is, at minimum, a sign that she herself was thinking carefully about those boundaries, about who should have access to what, and how her final decisions would shape what came after. Joni Lamb was a complicated person. The documented record of her life makes that undeniable. She was a woman of genuine faith who also made documented decisions that raised serious accountability questions. She was a founder who helped build something extraordinary, and who also, in her final years, presided over institutional conflicts that left real people genuinely harmed. She was a mother who was estranged from her own son in her final months, and who, according to at least one reported account, may have wanted a reconciliation that never fully arrived. That complexity does not diminish the genuine grief of those who loved her. It does not make her passing less significant or the tributes paid to her less sincere, but it does mean that the full story, including the quiet legal decisions made in the final 8 weeks of her life, deserves to be told honestly, with the same precision and care that the full story of any public figure deserves. The quitclaim deed is a doorway. What it leads to, questions about financial stewardship, about the nature of the relationship between Joni and Doug in those final weeks, about the future of a $40 million estate and the ministry it is connected to. Those questions remain open. The answers, if they come, will likely emerge slowly through legal proceedings, estate disclosures, and the continuing work of investigative journalists who have tracked this story with documented sourcing and genuine rigor. We will keep following it, and we will keep reporting it honestly. If this kind of careful, sourced reporting matters to you, give this video a like and subscribe so you never miss a story told with this level of depth. Leave a comment. This is a complex story, and we want to hear how you are thinking through it. And if you want to follow the full Daystar story, click the next video on your screen. Until next time, stay informed, stay discerning, and keep asking the questions that matter. God bless.